Hi, thank you for joining me. My name is Mindy Mandell. I know that last year was stressful for many of you and even painful for some of you. I do hope the new year is brighter. Well, today what I'd like to talk about are the 12 gods that Plato presented in his dialogue Phaedrus. And here is a quote from that dialogue. He says, "Now the great leader in heaven, Zeus, driving a winged chariot, goes first, arranging all things and caring for all things. He is followed by an army of gods and spirits, arrayed in 11 squadrons. Hestia alone, he says, remains in the house of the gods. Of the rest, those who are included among the 12 great gods and are accounted leaders are assigned each to his place in the army." So there are 12 gods he's talking about. Each has its own army of spirits that follow it. Who are the 12 gods, though? He doesn't name all 12 of them here. He names Zeus and Hestia, and at other places in the dialogue, he does name Hera and he names Ares, but he doesn't name all 12. And so there is some disagreement as to who the 12 gods are. What I'm going to present in this video is a diagram of the way that these 12 gods were presented by Proclus in his Theology of Plato. And I'm specifically drawing from book 6, chapter 22. Now I'm going to make a little diagram here, and I'm going to pull some phrases from the text. And so the phrases that I'm pulling come from the translation by Thomas Taylor. Okay, so first let me clear the screen so that we can make our diagram. And we're going to start with Zeus, because Zeus, of course, is the leader. He governs souls and bodies. Now, along with him, we have his brother Poseidon, the god of the oceans, and he governs over motion, so water representing that motion and the cause of generation, so he tends to be associated with souls. Now, to round it out, we know that they have a third brother here. We met him a few weeks ago, the charming Hades. However, he's not the one who Proclus names here. Instead, he chooses Hephaestus, who is the craftsman of the gods. And the way it's worded in the text is that he inspires the nature of bodies, and he fabricates the mundane seats of the gods. Well, what exactly does that mean? It means he works with bodies. And so I think the way to best understand the way that these are organized is to understand Proclus's organization. He works in groups of 3 called triads. So I'll make each one of these a point, and if we connect them, we can make a triangle. And so this often is symbolical of these triads. Rather than a straight line, it's connected, but it's not a circle because it has these 3 points, these 3 gods that stand out. And what we're going to find is that throughout these triads, the way Proclus has organized it is that the extremity, here represented by Hephaestus, relates to bodies, whereas the middle term, here represented by Poseidon, relates mostly to souls, or it's directly dealing with souls, whereas the summit of each triad governs over both souls and bodies. Now we can call these collectively the governing gods, and these are our ruler gods. And then each of these gods we're going to see can be understood triadically, because this is Proclus. He's never satisfied with something as simple as just these 3 gods. Now, each of these then can be considered a monad, and a monad is the collective representative, or intelligible representative of that entire triad. So each of these is a monad of its own triad, and it would look something like this. So then, like the green triangle is a whole world of which Zeus is the monad, and then we can name 3 gods around it. Each of these then has a collective function, and we're going to give those names. So whereas the triad in the middle, these are the governing gods. The green triangle represents the guardian gods, or sometimes are called immutable gods, or some other such synonym depending on the translator. And their function is to preserve each god in its proper station. The blue triangle are the vivific gods. So this is dealing with soul, the generative causes. And we find that generally goddesses are used to represent this generative function, with Poseidon, of course, being an exception to that. And then the final triad is the anagogic gods, gods who inspire and elevate souls. So now we're going to put these collective names inside. I went back to the dotted line inside so that we can read all of the names. And now what we want to do is name the gods. And so this will be our 12 gods. We have the 3 on the inside, and then we have 9 more to name. And I'm going to do this backwards because in our experiences, we're rising up. We start from the bottom and then work up. And we're going to see how this very much helps us understand our own spiritual growth. And so we're going to start with Apollo. His role is to perfect and convert souls to the intellectual truth through music, harmony, and rhythm. What does that mean? Well, in our studies, we find that we're drawn to patterns. We see a certain harmony in all the parts as they fit into a whole. That's part of the study of metaphysics, and that's what we are drawn to, the beauty of that. There's a certain rhythm to our reading and to our thoughts, and as we attach them to the truth of it all. And that is the power of Apollo. Next to him, we have Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. And she is what Thomas Taylor calls the amatory inspiration. She pervades through holes and she familiarizes souls to the beautiful. In other words, as we're reading these ideas, we find that holes pervade through our thoughts and our contemplations, and there's a beauty to that. And that beauty is what he's calling the amatory inspiration. And then at the summit of this triad is Hermes, the supplier of philosophy. And so also then he is the god of dialectic. And this is what leads us to the good. So next, now we're going to move on to the Vivific gods. And these are all goddesses, and they symbolize life in generation. So at the extremity here, we have Apollo's twin sister, Artemis. And she's said to perfect the imperfection of matter. Well, notice that Apollo and Artemis are both the extremities of their own respective triads. So they work on the soul through the body. Artemis does it at the psychological level. She is the goddess of midwives. And those of you familiar with the dialogue Theaetetus might remember that Socrates compared himself to a midwife. And he said, though, that instead of delivering babies, he delivers people of their insights. But he also has to find when their insight is a bad birth and they need to abort. And so he helps people clear away their false beliefs. And that's the role of Artemis. Coming into human form, we're bound to pick up some false beliefs in childhood, and she is the one who helps us clear those away, perfecting the imperfection of matter. Next to her is Hera. She imparts the generation of soul, brings life into the soul. As we gain in our growth, we feel a new life comes into our soul. This is the activity of the soul, the stages of our growth. We're growing our wings, so to speak, to use the language of the Phaedrus. She's helping us grow our wings. She is the goddess of our spiritual growth. And then at the summit here, we see Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. As the summit, she encompasses both soul and body. She's an energizing force. She is that vividness that is the mark of insight. When our studies start to become real and a new life comes into us, our studies are no longer dry and boring, they're exciting. And in this case, we can see the harvest in a symbolical way of what she gives birth to. Okay, finally, we have our guardian gods, and they're also called immutable gods, or other some such synonym, because of their role to preserve the power and the activity of the gods. So we find at the extremity here, Ares, working through the body, illuminating corporeal form natures with power and strength. Ares, of course, is the god of war. And anyone who has read Plato's Republic knows that Plato associated courage with war. We also see this in the laws. We need to develop power and strength in order to stay the course, and that's the power of Ares. When we build our spiritual energy, when we build our conviction in the divine laws and the commitment to honoring our place in the whole, we're tapping into the energies of Ares. He works alongside his sister Athena. Whereas Ares represents the power and strength that's developed through the body, Athena is the vitality of our intellect, that intellectual vitality that we build in our souls as we grow wisdom. And so in the words of Thomas Taylor here, she preserves through stable intellection and a self-energizing life. It's a rather enigmatic way of wording it. And then at the top here, last but not least, is Hestia. And remember in that quote we saw from the text, Hestia alone remains in the house of the gods. She is the abiding term, and she preserves the truth of what is real. Now, the triads are held together by ousia, which is often translated as essence, but essence doesn't quite hold the activity that the Greek word ousia does. Ousia is the activity that holds each triad together as a whole. And so that rounds out our total here. Now, we can understand this, we can study this chart and use it to fuel our contemplations, to help us better understand these functions of the gods. Because as we saw a few weeks ago, and I do recommend, those of you who haven't seen the video on the gods that I did a few weeks ago, I do recommend seeing that if you're interested in the gods. Because there I talked about some of the metaphysical ways that we can understand the gods and how we can use mythology in a way that brings intelligibility to the stories. And one of the things we saw is that each god represents a certain force or power, and we want to see how these forces work together. We can do that with these 12 gods. We can take each triad and see how the three gods work together, Hermes, Apollo, and Aphrodite, for example. Or we can take all of the extremities, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Hephaestus, and how do they work together? We can take all the middle terms, the summit terms. We can see how the triads function together. The anagogic gods are the ones that inspire us and lift us up. Once our practice take holds, the vivific gods are what bring a new life into our soul, a new awakening, a new energy to us. And it's the guardian gods that hold it all and preserve the wisdom that we've gained. And the governing gods are the intelligible gods that stand over them and keep the whole together. So we can think about these different ways of tying the gods together, and that helps us see more deeply into the way all of these gods function together. So thank you very much, and I hope that you enjoyed that. And if you did, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up. And please think about subscribing. I will put out videos. I try to do every week. I don't know if I'll be able to keep that up in the new year, as these topics, some of them are quite involved and take me a little more time, but I will try to do a new video each week. Thank you very much. If you have any questions or comments, by the way, please leave them below, or there is an address, email address in the comment box, in the description box. And I do hope you'll join me next time. Thank you so much.